Hello, everyone. Today, I will be talking to my two friends, Ciara and Luke. Ciara studies at the Faculty of Divinity, and Luke is our neighbor in the Faculty of History. So let's start with you, Ciara. When people hear the word divinity, they may feel a bit puzzled or confused. It's not a word we use in everyday English. What do you think that word means, or what did it mean to you many, many years ago?
I think the first thing and the simplest thing that it means to me is the faculty that we study in. So I think I've never really come across the word divinity until I came across looking for universities and knowing that, I have a talk in a faculty of divinity. And I think for me, that was the first encountering of this word in a sense. And so a place, I guess, divinity to me can sometimes mean a place. But then I was thinking, well, where does the word divinity come from? I guess the word divine, so like the godly, the spiritual. So then I was kind of thinking, well, divinity is something that we find in things that we encounter that remind us of God or remind us of spirituality. So I was thinking, actually, you might encounter the like divinity in art or in music or in literature. So I don't think it has to mean this very structured and obvious thing of like a place where you go and study God. Actually, it comes up in different ways, but it's not a word I think we encounter.
Would you be able to find divinity in the conversation we're having right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something in the nature of meeting with others and communing with people that says something to me about what the divine is and what divinity is. So like that kind of special form of connection and conversation and being understood by others, I think is a big part to me of what divinity.
All right, great. Now let's turn to our neighbor, Luke, who is a relative outsider or a relative insider.
Well,
When you hear the word divinity from your relative distance, what image comes to your mind? What do you think these people are doing studying divinity inside this faculty?
I don't know. I mean, when I definitely hadn't come across the word until I met Ciara, probably, and well, until I strolled past this strange blue and white building on my right as I walked into the history faculty, and I was like, wonder what they do there. So I don't know. I didn't really think about what it meant for a long time. Still thinking about what it means exactly. But I think, I think it's quite different to what we do in history. It's more about what stays. We're always looking at what changes. And I think that's quite a comforting. Well, I think comforting is diminishing. More, I don't want to say something that diminishes the role of history, but like something more magnificent, maybe more magnificent than what history studies, which is really fundamentally what doesn't stay. And so I think that's what I came to divinity. And the first time I'd have conversations with Ciara when we started going out, I would always be deeply perplexed by this idea, something that stays, that nothing stays over time. Because I was quite very secular upbringing, and history has become quite a secular subject. And so, yes, I think initially it was a very perplexing thing, but in recent years, because of Ciara and because of meeting other people here, I've started to think about it differently, and there is something that stays.
So when you say that historians study change and people in divinity study what remains, you are not trying to insinuate that historians are progressive and people in divinity are conservative.
No. I think that's just a generic way of distinguishing the two. But I think that way of thinking about it is problematic for both sides. And what I'm interested in at the moment is like as more of a side interest, but it is very much an interest. Is the relationship between theology and history. I mean, we've been talking about it, because there does seem to be a bit of a chasm between the two, and there is this tendency to see history as well as all about change, and theology is all about studying the perennial questions, and you can't really marry the two directly. I talk to fellows around the place, and some would be like, oh yeah, you know, those theologians, they're doing so fundamentally different thing to us. So yeah, but no, it's not to imply that theologians are all conservative and historians are all you know, progressive Marxists. I don't think that's the although you'll find those two, but you'll also find the inverse.
Yes.
So yeah.
All right. Now, Ciara, why does the study of religion matter so much to you that you have spent 3 years, 4 years of your life, you have dedicated those years to studying religion? What is it that grips you?
It's funny because that question does actually crop up quite a lot. When you tell people that you study theology, they're kind of like, whoa, what will you do with that? Like, what job will you have? Do you want to be a nun? And I think when I was younger, I really struggled to answer that question because I felt like, oh, maybe I have made a really bad decision and this won't take me anywhere. But I think the more and more I spend time with like theological ideas and concepts and writings, the more I find that they give me direction in a far deeper sense than just in a career. Like, I think I've learned so much about who I am and what comforts me and what scares me and what community means and what motivates people, and these kinds of just like fundamental questions about human life are addressed like constantly. Yes. in theology. So I think that's what it's meant to me. It's meant that I feel far more able to understand other people, and people from different places and people in different ages and struggling with different things. I think theology allows you to have the intellectual tools and the kind of communicative tools to communicate with other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, on that note, Luke, I know you have spent a lot of time studying the relation between theological visions or religious vocabulary on the one hand and social history, especially with respect to Islam. So do you think religion, the study of religion, can be the motivating, driving engine of the revolution, however you may take the idea of the revolution?
Well, I mean, as a historian, my first instinct goes to historical events where the study of religion has driven revolution. Most recently, well, most majorly recently, the Iranian Revolution of 1979.
Yes.
But then even, you know, there's a lot of people who make the comparison between Marxism as an idea and religion as an idea, as sort of containing similar archetypes, I guess you could say. But like, so that also you can see 1917 and the cult around Lenin and as a sort of secularized version of religion. Right. But so I do, but the study of religion, I think, can be the engine of revolution. And it's important, I think, that it's the study of religion rather than religion itself that can be the engine of revolution, because it's a more complex, deep relationship with faith and its representation, I think, can bring about a revolution that doesn't get lost. Because, for instance, what happens with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, a lot of people say that what happened there was that, although it began with the study of religion in people like Khomeini, who were clerics, and their whole life revolved around the study of religion, it became religion driving the revolution. And what that then became was an identity driving the revolution, an identity of being Islamic and from Iran. And then that became problematic and people were excluded from that. And it didn't become the actual sort of the eternal or the trans-historical got lost in that specific moment, and people became wedded to a very specific identity-driven idea of what religion was. So I think the study of religion can prevent something like that happening while also pursuing something as ambitious as revolution.
Yeah. So religion need not be the opium of the intellectuals or the coffee house of intellectuals.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, Marx has always supposed to have said, well, he did say that. But then people know less that he then went to Algeria and I think the 1870s, short before he died. Those dates might not be right, but
historian.
yeah, I know. I think it was 1876,
Oh,
but
good.
don't quote me on it. And he went to Algeria and he writes letters back to Engels, his partner in crime, I guess.
Partner in revolution.
Yes, exactly. And he writes, oh, actually, there's a different spirit in Algeria. There's a different spirit of equality and also quality of culture. And he actually unknowingly relates a story that he says is popular in Algeria at the time. But that I actually first read in Rumi, and this story is in Rumi, about a bookseller, a grammatician, sort of grammarian or kind of philosopher and a boatman, and they're on this boat, and it's a story by Rumi, and the philosopher goes, oh, have you read, do you know how to read? And the boatman replies, oh no, I don't. So then he says, well, you've wasted half your life. And then they hit a whirlpool, and the boat capsizes, and as they're sort of frantically trying to stay afloat, the boatman asks the philosopher, well, do you know how to swim? And he says, no, I don't. And he says, well, then you've wasted your whole life.
Oh, right.
But Marx relates that to Engels, and that's originally from Rumi. So it's quite, that thing of him saying, an opium of religion being the opium of the intellectuals. I think he did believe, but there were definitely fissures or gaps in that that we should try and fill.
Okay. And now, Ciara, the final question for you today. You have spent 3 years and you're still spending time here in the faculty. How has this time changed or recalibrated your understanding of what it means to be human?
I think I came across recently, I was reading Bell Hooks, who's a feminist theologian.
And Bell Hooks, which is spelled with a small b.
Small b, small h, yeah. And she writes about this idea of yearning. So like that we all have this or to be good feminists, to be good theologians, as her work has been taken, is to yearn for truth and yearn for justice and yearn. And I think the study of theology has led me to truly believe that as people, we all have this like kind of this desiring or this yearning or this motivation towards something bigger than us. And I think, in a secular kind of sense, that could be justice, or it could even be like, ideas like truth. But theology to me captures how important it is to be intentional in that yearning and to look at that kind of desire that we have in us for something bigger and greater and grander and put it to good use. So I think it's kind of made me feel that, as humans, we are always striving, and theology allows us to strive kind of positively rather than like selfishly or in a closed sense. It opens up our yearning to greater things.
Yeah. So the study of theology gives you some kind of structure to that yearning, to that longing, to the fire in your heart.
Yeah, and not necessarily just structure, but also it provides you with different ways of understanding what that yearning could mean or where it could be directed. It doesn't have to be structure in a restrictive sense. It's structure in a sense that facilitates this yearning to be translated outside of simple emotion into kind of something practical or something that is reflective and positive.
Maybe structure is too structural. I mean, maybe I meant compass points.
Yeah, exactly. Like a kind of map or
And Luke, finally, the question for you today is, many religious cosmological visions like Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, they have this yearning, this longing for justice, this hope for some form of equality. But when we study history, which is in your line of work, the last 3,000 years of human civilization have been structured, driven precisely by the absence of equality. So how do we cross this big, ugly ditch between hope and reality? Think carefully, because if you get the answer right, you have answered that 4 millennia of humanity have been waiting for.
I don't think I can.
No pressure.
But well, I think one one reason for that chasm between hope and reality is partly because, and I think it's more exaggerated today than ever, or perhaps not than ever, but particularly exaggerated today, is because the study of religion and the study of history have become so separate. The idea of trying to bridge what the so-called hope in religion and the reality, which is supposedly what history studies, becomes impossible. And I think, yes, historians need to start to try and think about the divine more and how it does work its way through history, and not sort of embody a sort of Protestant ethic of dividing the public and their public work as historians and their private faith, but trying to sort of marry those two and how they actually conceive of history. And I think doing that, and well, maybe on the other side, theologians actually using dates here and there. No, I'm joking. But perhaps being a bit more historically sensitive, and paying attention to context and so on. Perhaps marrying those two might reveal a way that leap towards the hope of equality and the reality of our historical past there might be a way or a methodology or a way to bridge those two that could be revealed.
I hope what you have said is not too heretical for a historical matter, and you won't get into any trouble.
Well, I don't know about that.
All right, Ciara and Luke, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.